Welcome to Palace Insider, where the royal walls whisper louder than ever. Leaked reports straight from Buckingham Palace have rocked Britain. King Charles allegedly slammed the palace doors shut in fury after what's being called one of the most shocking on-air blunders in royal history. This time, it's not about William or Harry. It's about Queen Camilla's children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles. Once quiet figures in the background, they've suddenly become the center of a royal storm. Their recent TV appearance, once brushed off as harmless, is now being labeled a bold swipe at the royal line itself. Some say a direct insult toward Prince William and Kate. The second that interview clip blew up online, chaos hit the palace. Phones buzzed nonstop, doors locked, and insiders whispered about a secret midnight meeting with the king. No press, no smiles, just raw authority. And the wildest part? Tom and Laura didn't even flinch. They walked in like players stepping onto a royal chessboard, acting as if they could challenge the crown itself. But what exactly did Laura Lopes say that made King Charles lose his cool? And is Tom Parker Bowles just cocky? Or is he the spark behind something much darker brewing inside the palace? Under the blazing studio lights, Tom's confident smirk glowed for all to see. The once laid-back food critic seemed to forget his place after Charles's coronation in 2023. Ever since then, Tom and his sister Laura had moved from quiet side figures to headline makers. They'd gotten used to royal cars and polite bows at Sandringham, but that comfort twisted into pure entitlement. Laura, dressed to perfection, had a sharp, defiant stare that said it all. And beneath their fake smiles with Prince William, years of silent rivalry and jealousy had already begun to boil. The live broadcast hit screens right at 8, prime time and primed for trouble. It all started calm, with talk about charity work, but things got tense the second the host mentioned the future of the royal family. Tom Parker Bowles leaned back in his chair, dripping arrogance, as if he ruled the room. With a cold smirk, he tore into Prince William, calling him rigid and rehearsed, accusing him of playing a royal role instead of living it. He mocked William's public duties, calling them hollow shows with no real grasp of modern Britain. The crew froze in disbelief as Tom kept going, acting like being the king's stepson gave him the right to judge the next in line. Then Laura Lopes jumped in, aiming straight at Princess Catherine. With her chin raised and lips curved, she sneered that Catherine's grace was nothing but a media illusion, calling her a polished figure with no real political weight. But the real shock came when Laura leaned toward the camera, voice sharp as glass, and dropped a line that rattled every viewer watching. Laura didn't hold back. She claimed it was her mother, Queen Camilla, who had truly held the monarchy together with grace and patience. She went even further, boldly saying Camilla deserved the crown more than anyone, hinting that Catherine was just a pretty piece on the royal chessboard. Every move told a story. Tom tugging at his silk tie after each sharp jab, Laura's eyes glinting with victory. They were sending a loud message. They weren't the quiet stepkids anymore. They acted like the Parker Bowles name was the one saving the royal image, blind to the ultimate rule. The line of succession is sacred. The crew backstage stood frozen, faces pale, realizing this wasn't a mistake. It was an open strike against William and Catherine's dignity. When the cameras finally went dark, the silence was thick. Tom and Laura rose like they'd just changed history itself, clueless that they'd crossed a line they could never uncross. Outside the studio, chaos erupted online. Clips of Laura's words, "Camilla deserves it more than anyone," spread like wildfire. Newsrooms across London went into overdrive, typing up furious headlines as the city held its breath, knowing those words would bounce right back to destroy the Parker Bowles name. Buckingham Palace rarely sleeps, but that night, an eerie silence took over its crimson halls. The golden light from grand chandeliers flickered across portraits of old monarchs as if history itself was watching what came next. Inside King Charles's private study, the familiar scent of sandalwood and old books felt heavier than ever. The king sat still behind his massive mahogany desk, his clasped hands tight with quiet fury. No routine papers tonight, just a glowing tablet playing the interview that had set the world on fire. Across global headlines, red banners screamed with Tom and Laura's faces. His private secretary hovered in the shadows, too scared to say a word, watching the king's calm expression shift into something far darker. At first, Charles had brushed it off. Just careless words, he thought. Nothing a quiet chat over breakfast couldn't fix. But as he listened to their voices echo from the screen, the calm cracked. And the king's patience began to burn away. Every cutting word from that interview hit where it hurt most. At William, his eldest son, and at Catherine, the daughter-in-law he's always protected. The king's tired eyes hardened into something sharp and cold. Each time Tom Parker Bowles sneered, lacking genuine understanding, Charles's jaw clenched tighter, the lines around his eyes deepening like cracks in frozen glass. His breathing grew heavy under that perfect silk shirt. This wasn't a family spat anymore. It was a public strike against the royal bloodline itself. Charles knew better than anyone the price of scandal. He'd spent decades patching up the wounds of history, trying to keep the monarchy steady, and now his wife's own children were tearing it all apart. When Laura's defiant words echoed, claiming Camilla deserved the crown more than anyone, the king froze. A sharp pain ran down his spine as silence swallowed the room. The ticking clock grew louder with every second. Inside him, a storm raged, his loyalty to Camilla on one side and his duty to the crown on the other, and both were demanding a price he could no longer ignore. On the other side of that inner battle stood his sacred duty to the House of Windsor. In that moment, Charles saw it clearly. Years of quiet indulgence had bred arrogance right inside the palace walls. Tom and Laura's actions weren't just impulsive. They came from people who'd started seeing royal power as their own playground. The betrayal didn't come from critics or tabloids. It came from his own dinner table at Highgrove. That realization struck deeper than any scandal ever could. Slowly, the king rose and walked to the tall window overlooking Buckingham Palace's courtyard, where guards stood frozen under the night sky. His trembling hand found the window frame, and his grip hardened into iron. The streetlights outside painted his face with cold determination. No advisors, no press, no hesitation. In that stillness, Charles wasn't a husband or a stepfather. He was the king. His voice, low but sharp as steel, finally broke the silence. This time, it cannot be overlooked. It wasn't just a statement. It was a royal verdict waiting to fall. From that moment on, King Charles knew the balance inside Buckingham Palace would never be the same. The gentle smiles, the quiet patience, it was all gone. The king lifted the palace phone, his voice calm but final, setting the stage for a confrontation that would decide William and Catherine's future. That morning, the cozy royal sitting room felt nothing like home. It felt like a courtroom. The sofas and glowing fireplace couldn't soften the air of judgment that hung heavy. Charles stood by the mantel, his shadow stretching long across the rug, silent enough to drown out the crackling fire. When Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes entered, there wasn't an ounce of regret in their eyes. They looked like people proud of the chaos they'd caused. Tom adjusted his jacket with smug confidence, leaning on the comfort of his mother's crown. Laura's heels clicked sharply as she approached, gaze locked on the king's back, expecting a calm lecture, not royal retribution. Charles finally turned, his movements slow but deliberate. His eyes didn't burn with rage, they were far colder. The room froze under that chilling emptiness. King Charles studied Camilla's children with piercing focus, finally seeing what had been hidden in plain sight. His patience had been mistaken for weakness. Deep down, he still hoped they'd show a hint of remorse, a quiet apology that might let him settle the chaos in private. But what he saw instead was defiance, bold and unshaken. Tom Parker Bowles sat there like a man convinced he'd done the right thing. To him, those cutting words about William weren't insults. They were truth. He thought he was the voice of a modern monarchy, free from what he called Windsor's outdated traditions. His chin tilted upward in quiet rebellion, a silent challenge to the king himself. Beside him, Laura Lopes looked just as unbending. She felt wronged for even being called in, as if defending her mother's honor was a noble cause. Years of jealousy toward Catherine had hardened her completely. Her grip on her handbag turned her knuckles white, every inch of her body screaming resistance. Every attempt Charles made to appeal to duty was met with Tom's smug smirk and Laura's cold stare. The room became a battlefield of silence. No shouting, just royal pride clashing in deadly calm. Their silence wasn't guilt. It was defiance, a daring test against royal power itself. King Charles saw it clearly now. The fracture in the family wasn't just a crack, it was a full-blown threat festering at the monarchy's heart. Tom and Laura didn't want acceptance anymore, they wanted dominance, and that realization hit him like a cold blade. The king had once believed love could unite them all, that Camilla's children could blend peacefully into royal life. But now, staring at their unyielding faces, he saw only ambition and pride tearing the family apart. Their arrogance wasn't just a family feud, it was betrayal, one that reached dangerously close to the throne itself. When Tom and Laura finally turned and left without a bow, the door slammed behind them with the weight of finality. A sound like a royal war drum. Charles stood frozen, his hands trembling with restrained fury, eyes fixed on the fading light spilling across the room. As the shadows deepened, his expression hardened. Mercy had no place left here. In his mind, a single thought began to form. The crown must protect itself, even from within. That night, a ruthless decision took shape, one that would shake the entire kingdom to its core. Buckingham Palace was drowning in silence, so still that the faint scratch of a pen could be heard cutting through the air. On the king's polished mahogany desk lay a single dossier, sealed in red wax beneath the golden light of an antique lamp. This wasn't just paperwork, it was royal judgment in motion. King Charles sat tall, though the centuries seemed to press down on his shoulders. In his hand, a gold-tipped pen hovered over the final line of a decree that could change everything. His thoughts were a storm. Memories of how he'd fought for years to protect Camilla and welcome her family into the royal circle now clashed with the sting of betrayal still ringing from that broadcast. Tom and Laura's cruel words hadn't just insulted William and Catherine, they had wounded the crown itself. The monarchy's unity, its dignity, its future were all on the line. With each heartbeat, Charles's hesitation froze into resolve. He knew if he didn't act now, their arrogance would open a dangerous door, one where pride could shatter the throne from within. The king's grip tightened, his decision sealed in silence and steel. The king's eyes traced every word of the decree: revocation of all privileges, removal from royal duties, withdrawal of honors. These weren't just punishments, they were the end of royal life for Tom and Laura. As the pen met paper, a slight tremor rippled through Charles's fingers, but it vanished beneath the cold resolve of a ruler protecting his crown. His signature flowed across the page, strong, sharp, and final, ending with a heavy dot of ink that sealed their fate. With that stroke, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes were erased from the palace's inner circle. No more security, no royal invites, no seats at grand banquets. Their access to the royal spotlight was gone in an instant. The faint click of the pen echoed like a gavel striking judgment. Charles leaned back, eyes half shut, seeing the faces of William and Catherine, the ones who'd carried the crown's dignity through humiliation and gossip. This decree, he knew, was his final act of protection for his heir. But in the quiet after the signing, one thought burned in his chest. This decision would break Camilla's heart. Still, the king knew what the throne demanded. Duty first, love second. There was no turning back now. The London night was pitch black, but inside the king's study, an invisible line had just been drawn. No press announcement, no royal drama, just silence. And that silence would speak louder than any scandal. The Parker Bowles family's slow fade from royal events would become the clearest message of all. The monarchy's patience had limits. Charles ran his fingers across the page, feeling the texture of the drying ink. A hollow calm filled the room, painful but peaceful. He had made his choice: the crown over family, duty over emotion. Rising from his chair, he walked to the fireplace, watching the blue flames flicker low. "William and Catherine will be safe," he whispered, his words melting into the shadows. The sealed decree now sat inside its envelope, waiting to change everything. By morning, Tom and Laura would wake to a new reality, one without privilege, protection, or power. And as dawn broke, whispers began slipping through Buckingham's thick stone walls. No statement was issued, but the truth was obvious. Their names vanished from royal schedules overnight, and that silent erasure exploded across Britain's headlines. The nation was stunned, realizing something monumental had just happened behind closed palace doors. Across Britain, from gossip tabloids to serious political panels, a storm of outrage exploded. Every headline aimed straight at the arrogance of Queen Camilla's children. In his private London villa, Tom Parker Bowles sat frozen, watching his own face torn apart on every screen and newspaper front. The charm and confidence he once flaunted were gone, replaced by panic and disbelief. He gripped his phone tightly, calling every powerful contact he had, but not one answered. The city's elite had gone silent. Overnight, Tom had become untouchable, a man exiled by royal decree. He paced the room, footsteps pounding the floor, realizing the golden protection he'd once enjoyed had vanished completely. Meanwhile, Laura Lopes was unraveling under the weight of public fury. The same pride she once wore like a crown shattered as headlines and comments flooded the internet, dragging her name through the mud. The British people, fiercely loyal to Princess Catherine, refused to forgive the insult. Laura shut herself away, curtains drawn tight as cameras flashed outside non-stop. Each time she dared to look in the mirror, she didn't see privilege or poise anymore, just the ghost of a future queen fantasy that had finally collapsed in on itself. Laura saw only one reflection now, a woman the entire nation had turned away from. The pressure hit its breaking point when a stone-faced courier arrived with an envelope from the palace itself. No note from their mother, no soft words. Queen Camilla had gone silent to protect her throne. Inside was a single sheet of paper carrying the weight of judgment. They were ordered to issue a public apology to Prince William and Princess Catherine. No apology, no forgiveness. Refuse, and they'd be erased completely, banned from royal life, titles stripped, names forgotten. It was the cruelest cut of all. The spotlight they'd once lived for was now their punishment. Pride clashed with fear as Tom and Laura realized they stood on the edge of oblivion. Tom stared out at the furious crowd below, chants rising for William and Catherine, and finally saw the truth. He couldn't fight a king, and he couldn't fight the people. Their arrogance had burned itself out, leaving only ashes. Charles's cold resolve had trapped them in a corner where rebellion looked foolish. In that dark silence, one truth hit them hard. They had never truly belonged to the House of Windsor. They had only been guests who flew too close to the crown. The throne's true master had brushed them aside without hesitation. The storm outside wasn't just public rage, it was judgment itself, a collective verdict against pride. The cost of arrogance was isolation, while William and Catherine stood stronger than ever, wrapped in the nation's fierce loyalty. Hidden behind mansion walls, Tom and Laura faced a lesson they'd never imagined. They were learning to bow. The act they once mocked had become their last chance at survival, their only hope to avoid being wiped from the royal story entirely. Winter settled over Buckingham Palace in a blanket of gray fog, its spires half hidden, but its power unmistakable. The scandal that had once shaken Britain began to quiet, not from forgiveness, but from erasure. The Parker Bowles name was being scrubbed from royal life, piece by piece, as though they'd never set foot past the palace gates. Inside those echoing corridors, silence ruled like a ghost. And in that silence walked Queen Camilla, alone. Her elegant face, once alive with emotion, now looked carved from ice. She spoke to no one, defended no one. Bound by crown and duty, she chose silence over rebellion, even as it broke her heart. Camilla knew the truth. Any defense of Tom or Laura would slice straight through her own power. She'd watched their downfall unfold overnight, and her silence was the final sacrifice to keep the crown secure on her head. In his private home, Tom Parker Bowles was a shadow of the man he once was. The flashy charm, the confidence, it was gone. Invitations from London's elite dried up one by one until none remained. Most days, he sat alone in his dim library, staring at old photos beside the royals, relics of a world he'd lost forever. The arrogance that once carried him had rotted into quiet shame. Every time William or Catherine appeared on the news, adored by the nation, Tom felt that chill again. The realization that he hadn't been beaten by tabloids or gossip, but by the silent, unshakable power of the king. Laura Lopes was no better off. Her sharp confidence had turned into cold bitterness. Stripped of her titles and shunned by high society, she lived in lonely exile within her own city. The palace's demand for an apology still sat unopened, mocking her pride. The once gilded Parker Bowles name had finally collapsed, crushed beneath the weight of royal blood. King Charles stood alone on the balcony, the cold wind brushing against his face as he gazed over the grand forecourt below. His hands gripped the stone railing, his sharp eyes following the guard's perfect rhythm. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about power, control, and the unshakable rules of the crown. The king had shown everyone, even his own family, that the throne isn't a shared prize. It's a duty built on iron and sacrifice. Yes, the bond between him and Camilla now carried a scar, one that might never fade. But the House of Windsor stood stronger, disciplined, steady, and untouched by rebellion. As Charles turned back into the palace, the echo of his steps filled the vast halls, a lonely sound, yet one that carried the full weight of authority. No apology was ever needed. Tom and Laura's silence was punishment enough, their names already fading into royal oblivion. The monarchy had spoken. It would never bend to ego or entitlement. At the far end of the corridor, William and Catherine walked hand in hand with their children, laughter breaking through the heavy air. The king paused, a faint relief in his eyes. The storm had passed, but its lesson would live forever. And that's it for this royal saga. What do you think about King Charles's decision? Should he have shown mercy, or did justice prevail? Let us know in the comments, hit that like button, share this story, and don't forget to subscribe for more Palace Insider drama. See you on the next one.